This is Fred Beck from Fred Fighting, proudly sponsored Vampire Fight Store and today I'm very lucky joined by Gio Torralba. Gio, it's nice to have you on the Zoom, mate. How are you?
Fantastic, bro. I know you asked me to do this a few months ago, and since then you have blown up, bro. I mean, you're doing interviews with Tyson Fury and shit now. I just keep seeing your channel just go up and up and up. Like your views are getting your videos are getting like hundreds of thousands of views. You're killing it, bro. Honestly, you're smashing it.
Yeah, thanks. That means a lot coming from you. Yeah, it's kind of mad in a way, kind of crazy. But how about yourself though? What have you been doing? What have you been up to?
Recently, not too much. We had a podcast the other day. Obviously, work for True Geordie at the moment. So we shot with Francis Ngannou. Gymshark set that up for us. And I know you're a big UFC fan. I'm a massive UFC fan as well. Like being able to like meet Ngannou and stuff was a man experience. So that's sort of been the highlight of my week so far. Yeah, I'm still
Well,
on
yeah,
the high from that.
it's going to take quite a lot of topping to be meeting Francis and Garni. I think that'll be a highlight of people's most weeks. But you get to meet quite a lot of people, don't you? I know you had Michael Bisping down in the studio, Israel Asanya. What are they all like up close in person? Because when I interview people, I don't actually meet them most of the time. I kind of talk to them over Zoom. They're like actually in person.
Yeah, obviously, I guess a lot of people say they have bad experiences when it comes to meeting celebrities. The old saying is never meet your heroes. I've never had a bad experience. Maybe that's because they come in and they know what they're going to do there. You know, they understand that it's part of sort of their job to do sort of press and things like that. But it's great. You know, there's certain people like I don't get starstruck over. Sort of like, general celebrities, sort of like, I don't know, Kieran Trippier and other sort of like football guests that we have on. But whenever we have a fighter in, I always get like sort of goosebumps and tingles, bro. It's just like, it's just seeing someone that you admire and look up to so much and being able to meet them in person. Yeah, it's mental.
Is it more difficult to do your job when you're kind of starstruck by them? Or do you have to get on a bit and it's all right in the end?
So not so much because I edit the podcast. So my job doesn't actually start properly until the podcast is finished. So during the podcast, I'll just be there helping filming because we're obviously just a quite small team there. So I'll be on helping out with the cameras and things like that. But it's not, I don't have to focus too much with doing that. The camera guy will come in, we'll set up all the cameras. All I need to do is just make sure it keeps recording. And then, my job happens afterwards. So I can sort of enjoy the moment there. If I had to do the job at the same time whilst these, big names are there, I think it would be quite difficult for me,
Yeah, that's quite good. But editing the podcast, when I edit these videos, it's not really that hard to edit. Obviously, I think when you're editing like True's normal videos or like True's news, then that's a lot more difficult because you have to put lots of clips in. But how difficult is editing the podcast? Is it just cutting things out?
It's pretty much like that. Like, this, you do your podcast yourself. Podcasts are very straightforward to edit. You just link up all your cameras and stuff, go through and vision mix it. The difficulty comes with us when we build our intros and things like that. So one thing that we try and do in the True Geordie podcast is build sort of like exciting intros that we put at the beginning of the podcast to hype people and get people wanting to click on and watch the pods. And that's the only difficult part because it's a very creative process and I work very closely with Brian. It's pretty much 50-50 when it comes to the actual editing process of that between me and Brian. Like we'll spend a lot of time building these intros to make them as good as possible. So that's the only difficult part. Doing the podcast is not difficult. I mean, genuinely, I think I could train anybody to edit a podcast within less than a few days. Very straightforward.
Yeah, I've had a few people DMing me saying, "Oh yeah, if you need any help editing, just send me a message." I'm like, "Oh yeah, thanks for the offer, mate." But it's not too difficult editing an interview. But that's interesting. We said about the intros there because that's what kind of get people hooked. I know James English is an intro for his podcast. Geordie obviously has one for his. But just be careful about not getting copyrighted using other people's videos for that.
So you know what's funny? When I first joined, the first thing I ever did with Brian was a documentary for a series that he started called True Life Stories. We did it on Conor McGregor, and that had a lot of copyright material on there. And I just come straight out of film school. So for me, I was like, "Are we sure we can use all this stuff?" And he was like, "Yeah, it's fine." We were using like the soundtrack to Braveheart for most of it, and we put it out, and it was fine. I don't know what it is. Like I think what we do certain things to avoid getting copyright strike because more often than not, when you get copyright strikes, it's an automatic thing. So it gets flagged up on YouTube, and it's like, right, you've used a certain amount of content that's not your content, so we've got to put a restriction on it or block it or whatever. What we've realized is, if you use less than 15 seconds, then you should be good. Really? So we've just used that rule.
Is that the same for music? Is that the same for music, or is that really?
I think so, yeah, because we found out this rule when we did the Kanye West documentary when we were sort of using Kanye's music, but we couldn't use too much of it. And we were still, I think that's still like copyright fine today. So that's the rule that we always go by, just less than 15 seconds and we should be good. Because there is obviously a rule, a law in YouTube called fair use. So if you're sort of you're not just uploading content that's not yours. If you're using the content in a way that is sort of adding something to the product, or you're adding commentary or things like that, you get away with it under fair use. So yeah, that's how we get away with it usually.
Okay, that's quite interesting then. I didn't know that. Yeah, thanks, I'll have a look into maybe you doing some few intros. But what would you say the hardest thing about your job is though, Gio? What's the hardest thing about it, most difficult thing?
Oh my gosh. The most difficult thing is probably when we need to get things out fast, you know, like these fast turnaround things, when things are in the news, for instance. So one of the most complicated things that I do is True News. Now, True News is something that didn't really exist before I started the channel, something that me and Brian worked on together based on sort of my editing style that I picked up over the years, and his, you know, comedic sort of style that he wanted to get across in a way that wasn't a podcast. And over the time, it's become more of a complicated edit process. The reason why it's difficult is because it's news. So as soon as we've shot it, we're on a ticking time bomb then until that news becomes old news, and we're just trying to get out as quickly as possible. So it's like having to do quite complicated edits with quick turnarounds. And you know, like if you do things too quick, sometimes mistakes will come up, and sometimes you know, you can't quality check everything, and you're constantly worried and it's constant pressure. But when it goes out and everything's fine, it's a massive sigh of relief. So I'd probably say, yeah, like quick turnaround, True News and things like that. Generally, apart from that.
How long do you have though, Gio? How long do you have the turnaround?
So usually what we'll do with True News, because we'll shoot quite a lot in, we'll shoot on like say Friday. I'll have all day Saturday to sort of edit it. And then on the Sunday or the third day, whatever that may be, I'll sit with Brian in the morning. We'll just go through everything. Brian will cut bits out. Like Brian is such a massive part of every creative process of what we do. So he'll go through, cut things out, change things, make suggestions, and then he'll sort of leave me with like a timeline with loads of things cut out. I'll just put it all together, add any last minute sort of imagery or music that we need. So basically 2 days from filming.
Okay, because I can kind of relate to that in a way, because obviously for interviews it's news at the same time as news breaking. And I remember even when you go to the boxing press conferences, I don't take my laptop normally with me, but most kind of, because the Wi-Fi is so slow, everyone uses their data or hotspot, but most people try and get those interviews out as fast as possible, because generally everyone's kind of asking around the same kind of topics. Everyone wants to break the news first, especially if you're in a media scrum, everyone's get their little clip out first. So it can be quite stressful in that way. But
I saw that actually, because I went to Tyson Fury versus Schwartz in Vegas a few years ago, and that was the first time that I got to see like sort of the media side of it. And I saw Coogan from IFL. Yeah. He was there with his laptop, like editing the videos he was going as it was going out. So that made me realize, oh yeah, this has to be out like rapid. It's kind of mental, isn't it? And the Wi-Fi has to be good as well. The Wi-Fi goes down, I bet everyone's going mental, you know. Yeah,
the Wi-Fi. Yeah, everyone does. The media do get quite stressed out of the Wi-Fi first. Well, I guess why everyone always has so much. Everyone takes portable charger for their phone. Everyone always has a lot of data because it's used as a personal hotspot, I guess. But then make sure you got. But I guess if you're in Vegas or if you're anywhere London, the hotspot's always going to be okay, isn't it? Because you're not on the countryside.
You must be the youngest there of the lot. No, do you never find that? Because you're sort of like learning all this now, but at an age where, because like if you don't mind me asking, you're 17, aren't you?
Yeah.
On your profile, isn't it? Yeah. Bro, there can't be that many 17-year-olds going about doing the media stuff.
Well, I started when I was 16. I think everyone's 18 plus doing it. Yeah.
I think you're sort of like in 10 years time, like you're 27, you're going to be killing the game, bro. You know what I mean? That's mental. Like 10 years to be 27. No, 100. I think on the trajectory you're doing right now, I mean, you're already. How long have you been doing sort of like the boxing media stuff for?
I started in September of 2020, so nearly a year and a half.
A year and a half, and you're doing the interviews with like Tyson Fury in there, front and center in like the biggest fights, bro. Come on. Yeah, I'm saying like you're learning all this stuff now, and then in 10 years time, you're going to be like running the show.
Well, that'd be something. I don't know about that though. That'd be pretty cool. That's kind of the dream in the way.
That's what I see. That's what I see. I think that's going to happen.
But one question I want to ask about True Geordie is, obviously I spoke to Wade Clemens about this, and he was quite complimentary about him, about how good the production is, because he stands out about how kind of high quality the camera is. What's the best quality you have?
We shoot on Blackmagic Ursas, so we shoot on quite big like production quality cameras. We'll shoot 4K 50 on everything.
Yeah, it's impressive, isn't
we
it?
export out in 1080, yeah. Brian, the thing is, this all just stems from Brian.
Wait, how long does that take to export then, if it's that good quality?
Oh, on a podcast, maybe about half an hour, something like that.
Whoa. Something must be wrong here. Because say this interview, say we go for 20 minutes, and I put it on DaVinci Resolve, and it's Zoom quality. I edit on DaVinci. That'll take me about 40 minutes to upload.
40 minutes to export and get up.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, we've got very good machines where we are now. So the thing is, just go back to this. Like, Brian is very particular when it comes to the quality. I think, you know, a lot of the reason why the quality is so good on the channel is because Brian just keeps pushing and pushing the barrier and trying to make it as good as possible. Like, it's something we're constantly thinking about. We never sort of get comfortable and just go, oh yeah, this is fine. So yeah, we've obviously invested a lot of money into the cameras. A lot of the money that's made from the company gets reinvested back into the equipment, back into the way that things look. But yeah, so the machines that we've got are able to just get things out rapidly. And luckily we've got a good team of people that help us out as well, like technicians and things like that, to make things as efficient as possible. But yeah, that's we export out a Final Cut. So I know that you edit on DaVinci, but I've always been a Final Cut guy. So maybe it's something to do with that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like your football team in a way, isn't it? Your editing software, because you just get used to it. It's like people like stay on Premiere Pro, you just pay for that one. DaVinci's free as well, I use DaVinci. But everyone kind of stays to the editing software because no one can bother to spend about 10 hours in a day to try and master the editing software once again. Yeah. You've obviously met you the podcasts most of the time. Who's kind of the coolest person you met, would you say? Because you probably must have met loads of podcasts.
Yeah, cool as in like sort of chill.
Yeah, I just remote like you can't be surprised almost how relaxed they are and kind of how chilled out they are. How down to earth.
Oh, down to earth. Oh, you know what's funny? Actually, I was going to say Israel Adesanya because he was super down to earth, just a chill guy. But I guess that's sort of perceived anyways in his sort of like natural persona. But the way I sort of see sort of down to earth is, so for instance, we have some guests that come in with big entourages. Now we've had Tyson Fury on. When Tyson Fury came on the podcast, he came with a load of people. His dad was one of them. And then he had like a woman with him that was his sort of PA. And a lot of the
that's Mel. That's Mel PR, yeah, Melissa.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, it's been a while. It was a couple of years ago, so I don't know if it's the same person. But yeah, it was a woman that was there sort of just speeding up things and just making sure that everyone was out on time. I've had a couple of guests that live sort of in the area, or at least not too far, so they were able to just come in on their own. And for me, if they're able to just come in on their own and just sort of like sit and chill out, it changes the atmosphere a bit. It feels like there's just like a mate just coming down and just spending time with us kind of thing. Now, the two people that stand out in that sense are Eddie Hearn. So when Eddie Hearn, he came completely on his own when we were doing the KSI Logan Paul thing. And then more recently, we had Louis Theroux. Now, Louis Theroux lived in the area, so he sort of just biked down and got his bicycle down and then just sat with us. And he was so down to earth. Like, he walked in, and that's the funny thing. Louis Theroux is someone I idolize, is someone that even growing up, like years before I even started watching Brian, I'd watch his documentaries with my mom and my girlfriend and things like that. And he's like the greatest documentary maker of all time in many people's eyes. But when he came in, I didn't get that same element of starstruck because it was so natural and casual and cool the way that he just came in. You know what I mean? Like, it was just so easy to speak to him because it felt like I sort of like already knew him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. So are you kind of saying it's more tense or more uneasy if it's more of an entourage there where they come on their own?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, not in a bad way. I mean, obviously, like obviously in Geordie, like this weekend came with a lot of people from the gym shop. Like, we expected 8 to 10 people that were all sat in. So sometimes when there's a lot of people there, it's very much like you're constantly reminded, oh wow, this person's a big deal. You know what I mean? Like, you can't really, like, I guess, approach them in the same way. Not like they're unapproachable or anything, but it's just because of the intensity, as you say. But when Louis or Eddie just come in on their own, it's kind of like, oh, they're just, you know, they're vibing with us rather than like the tension being set by the amount of people that are there. So I definitely prefer it when there's less people there. But obviously, a lot of the people that we have on now are big guests, so they're obviously going to roll in with an entourage kind of thing.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from there. It's interesting to say big guests because, like, for most boxing channels or most like interview channels, they kind of interview anyone, and no matter how famous they are or how not well known they are, they interview everyone. But is it difficult keeping a high standard of guests on the podcast?
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. Luckily now, I think the more you do, then the more like sort of people are aware. Like, for instance, we had Usman on, and I think that definitely encouraged Adesanya to come on once he saw the way that Brian was able to conduct a really nice, calm interview with Usman. Like, I think that Usman interview that Brian did with him is the best. It got the most out of Usman's personality in anything that I've ever seen before. And then I think Ngannou even mentioned in the recent podcast that he wanted to come on based on the first two or something like that. So it's hard sometimes to build that standard, obviously, because Brian wants really good quality interviews. The way that, and I'm sure won't mind me saying this, but he has described the podcast in a way as being a restaurant. Like, if a restaurant constantly gives you good service and good meals, then you're more likely to come back and back and back. But the minute that restaurant serves you a bad meal, that's it, bro. You ain't going back. So that's something that, going back to Brian, like he's very particular with these kind of things. And it is difficult, obviously, at times. And we've experienced difficulty in the past not being able to be consistent with the podcast because those big name guests aren't able to consistently come on. But we're in a bit of a rhythm now where we're getting the big guests, and more big guests are aware of the podcast because it's more sort of in the social sphere, and they're more likely to come on. So I guess it all goes back to consistency. If you're able to build consistency, then you're able to maintain the quality of guests.
Yeah, and I guess that's quite interesting. We were saying there about how Israel Adesanya saw that Usman have been on, so then he's more lenient to going on. But how many guests do you have lined up at the moment over the next few months? Is it like a massive schedule, or is it? Because for me, it can be a schedule. For me, like right now, I've got no one lined up on Zoom. I know I've got a few fight weeks coming up. I know I've got a load of interviews like Maurizio Sulaiman, Hamza Shiraz. I've got a load of interviews like lined up. Not lined up, but I've already got it on my SD card, so I can upload it. But how many interviews do you have lined up at the moment to come?
I don't actually know, and I'm being honest. I'm not saying that. Like, I don't know. I've heard murmurs about potential guests because that's usually how it happens. Like Brian will message. I was in Brighton weeks ago, just like for a couple of days off, and I was getting on the train back to London, and Brian messaged me saying Adesanya next Monday on the podcast or whatever, and I was like, what? Like it was completely out of the blue. Like we'd never even spoke about the idea of Adesanya on the pod, so I was like, this is amazing. And sometimes we'll find out a few days before, or we'll not even have sort of confirmation. So right now there's a few murmurs of potential guests and that, but I don't know exactly. We don't have things where it's like, all right, next week we have this person, the week after that we've got this person. We don't have it like that at the moment, I'm afraid. So I can't give you a clear answer on that, I'm afraid.
Do you ever get this? Happens to me. I've kind of learned not to get excited about any guests until the interview's done and it's out. It happened to me loads of times. People replied like, "Hell yeah, let's do it." Then they haven't got back to me since. Does that happen to you guys a lot? You get really excited about something and then it doesn't turn out happening.
Oh wow. Yes. I want to give specific names just in case it happens in the future.
Yeah, don't say the names. You want to burn any bridges.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because obviously a lot of the names that I'm thinking about are big names. And it's not only just people, it's also brands as well. So brands have sort of said, yeah, we can get this person on and that person on. And if for whatever reason it doesn't work out with the brand, or we see through the sort of deal with the brand, those things don't happen. And like promise, obviously there's a lot of promises that get made that sometimes don't come to fruition. So it's definitely happened before where we've been excited about, oh, we could get this person on. But usually those people that are promised are like A-lists, are like people that are like, earth-shattering podcast guests that I don't think I've ever even done podcasts before. But yeah, so yeah, it's happened before. So I know what you mean though. And until we've got like a date booked, then it's difficult to get super excited about it.
Not even if the date booked, I think like make sure when they're on the Zoom, when you run on the Zoom, they're like, okay, or you got them in the studio, I think. That's for you guys. Having them in the studio, like, okay, it's happening. But somebody's gonna have a date that they can pull out or cancel. Be like, oh, blimey, I have to rearrange, and it might not happen then. Yeah,
I won't say who it is, but we had someone recently who cancelled the first time, so then we got pushed back. So then we were setting up on the morning of getting ready for the podcast, and they cancelled 45 minutes before they were meant to arrive. So we had everything set up, because I think a lot of people maybe expect that they just rock in and we have everything set up and just hit record. No, like we do very many shows. We do obviously like Pain Game, Showdown, Kickoff, Knockout, Podcast. So like we have different setups for everyone. So if we're setting up for a podcast, we'll be there like hours before setting up. So we were literally ready. We've been there for 2 hours setting up. Everything was ready pretty much to go. We only had 45 minutes until the guest was supposed to arrive, and then they cancelled. But yeah, I won't say who it is, but yeah, it happens. That
was the best of us. Were you there for the John Kavanagh interview when Geordie interviewed him? You weren't?
No. Oh, I was working with Brian at the time, but I wasn't there at the studio. So that was the time. I was actually still at uni during that. So I started working with Brian in my last year of uni. So the first year I was sort of part-time. So I would be like doing my uni work and then going home and then like editing. And it was like double full-time. So I was like trying to do uni at the same time I was working with Brian. So I didn't go to the podcast as much as I'd like to back then. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. If I ever meet Brian, I have to say thank you for that, because I think John Kavanagh was my third ever interview. So I was very, very inexperienced. And I see him reply saying, oh yeah, let's do it. And I was like, blimey. And then he says, a time is 2 hours. And I'm like, I got 2 hours to prepare one of the biggest one of the biggest stars in combat sport. But then I watched the first like 5 minutes of Brian's
Yeah.
podcast, and I just copied the questions from that. So then,
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hey, you know what they say? Imitation is the best form of flattery. So I'm sure Brian will be sound with that.
Yeah, hopefully it would be. But yeah, it's good talking today. What have you else got? What have you got coming up though over the next few months for yourself?
Ah, man. You know what? We just sort of we've got what have I got coming up? We're just going with the flow at the moment. That's the thing. Like with this industry, it's quite unpredictable. You know what I mean? In other jobs, like sort of what you're going to be doing for the next few months. You can almost plan out exactly how things are going to be. But right now, for me, yeah, it's just taking things as they come. For me, I just get excited for whenever. Yeah, as you said, you've got big fight weeks coming up. I'm the exact same. I'm a huge fight fan, so I'm looking forward to UFC 274, which is happening like in 2 weeks. Yeah, so I think we're going to be doing a live stream for that. That's one thing that I've sort of been branching into a little bit more with Brian, like jumping on the knockouts and things like that, having fun doing that. So yeah, looking forward to UFC 274, whatever podcasts we've got coming up, and just getting set for the summer and different things that we've got coming up on the channel. Yeah.
Yes,
What about you?
good. Well, I've got my birthday's 10th of May, so that'd be a bit weird being 18. I don't want to be 18. I want to stay young. I like being 16.
I wish I was 18. I'm going to be 24 in June. And you know what's mad as well? Like, obviously in this industry, I feel like I'm considered young because I work with a lot of people like in my sort of like scene that are like 10 years older than me usually, or like at least 2 years older than me. It's very rare that I'll find someone that's exactly my age. And you're like what? How old? 5 years younger than me?
Yeah,
Bro.
Wait, no, you're 24.
I'm gonna be 24. I'm 23 now. I'm gonna be 24 in June 6th.
Yeah, that's 5 years. Yeah, and hopefully because I got the 14th and 15th. I think there's a Wasserman boxing card, and then Dean White's show, and those are two quite good cards. And then you got well, the problem is the UFC never come over here. It was like once a year, and hopefully it's twice a year this year. So maybe I can try and get accreditation for that. And I got Craig Richards, Joshua Boatsy, I think in May. That's the O2. So you got a few fights ahead, but nothing big. I need to make sure those influencer cards happen again.
Oh, 100%. Obviously, that's something you've capitalized on because you've done the show star. You did the show star recently, didn't you?
Yeah, lucky, yeah.
Backstage. Yeah, no, it was good though because it really managed to get your name out there. It managed to get you a lot of good views. That's what I think. That's the turning point. Because when you messaged me first to do this part, it was before the show star event. I can't remember how many subscribers you had at the time.
I was on about 2,000. Yeah.
Well, now you're on like what 15,000 subs, and you're like.
I'm nearly. The hope thing is, I hope I get 20,000 before my birthday. I'm on like 19,800.
Oh, 19. And you want to get 20,000 before your birthday?
Yeah, I'm on 19,000 right now.
Oh, you're gonna smash that, bro, obviously. Set it for 25. Set the goal for 25,000. But yeah, you've got this. What's happening in YouTube boxing at the moment? I think the KSI card is rumored at the moment, isn't it? It's not like confirmed 100%. I think that'll be good when it happens because I think the show star event was fun in areas, but it sort of brought out the dirty side of YouTube boxing, sort of the embarrassing side of YouTube boxing, where it's not really, you know what I mean? The quality of the fights wasn't great. There was obviously like bad things that happened. The racist rapper guy at the beginning, like the headbutts and things like that. And I think what JJ is good at doing is bringing out the best of YouTube boxing.
Professionalism, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly, and getting the eyes of the mainstream. Like, I don't think Eddie Hearn or anyone that was in mainstream boxing looked at Showstar and thought, this is something that we could develop on, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I can't really complain about Showstar. I got 4 million views from it, so I got nothing bad to say about
you benefited from it. I think you definitely benefited from it. But generally, I think, YouTube boxing took a big hit. It took a big shot in the face for that. But yeah,
YouTube boxing, make sure it continues, make sure it keeps happening. How long do you think it'll last for? Another 3-4 years, maybe max?
What, in life? What do you mean?
Well, no, the YouTube boxing. How long do you think that's going to last for?
Oh right. Sorry, I thought you meant me. You know what's funny? I think it's going to take one more fight, and then that's it. And I feel like, to be honest, when I say one more fight, I mean a big fight. I don't think I'm excited for KSI versus Alex Wasabi. I don't think I'm excited for KSI versus Austin McBroom. I think I'd be excited for KSI Jake Paul, even though I personally think Jake Paul's now on a different level. I think he's exceeded the quality of YouTube boxing. I'm not saying he's a proper professional boxer by any means, to the point where he could contend for a title and things like that. But I just think the level that Jake's on now would be dangerous for JJ, because JJ isn't a technical boxer in my eyes. I know that sometimes he has a go at Deji and has a go at Deji's technical boxing, but JJ's not a technical boxer. He just sort of wails his arms out and he goes forward, and he just, he he has the dog in him and he has the heart to get
Yeah,
him
that's
through, and that's
interesting.
how he
That's
won.
interesting. You were saying that about being a technical boxer. I interviewed Jeff 2 days ago, I think. He trained, yeah, he's training KSI. And Jeff was saying that KSI didn't really do anything that Jeff was telling him to do kind of in the training camp. That was completely different in the ring, even though he still got the win, which is good. But I think he can be technical. I think he just let it loose that night.
I don't think he's ever shown technical boxing. I think maybe potentially in the first fight with what's his name, with Joe Weller. Like, I feel because Joe Weller was, well, I love Joe, but he was just a bit of a punching bag for the first few rounds. And I think that was JJ's ability to show what the technical aspect that he learned and picked up from Vidal. But in the second fight with the first fight with Logan and the second fight with Logan, it was great determination, heart, and also it went down to Logan's apprehension in that fight, in those fights, not to pull the trigger on him and to really go for it. I think that's really what managed to secure JJ the win the second time. I think he was very lucky to win it the second time. And I think if he does the right training with Jake, and also I don't think he's going to be technical against Jake. And I think that's why it's an exciting prospect, because Jake is very technical now, whereas JJ isn't. So it's going to be interesting to see how Jake does with someone that does not give a fuck and shows him no respect, walks forward, wails big shots. And if one of those lands on Jake, it could seriously hurt him. And if Jake's in a position where he's hurt, then JJ could do it. Now, I think, Jake's going to have enough to not allow that to happen. But it's these questions that get me excited. I don't care about, because if Austin McBroom wins, then where does that put YouTube boxing? For me, it just needs one big fight, KSI versus Jake Paul, stacked undercard, one of those big, great YouTube boxing fight nights like the one we had, KSI Logan Paul 2. No, 1, where it was all YouTubers on the card, like Gibbo. I don't want to see it headlining another Matchroom thing or a Showtime thing. I'd just love to see a KSI, Jake Paul, a YouTube promotion. Jake and JJ could come together, build it with YouTubers on the card, and then that just sort of be the final goodbye to YouTube boxing. I'm not really excited for this iDubbbz thing. I don't even know anyone that's fighting on that. I don't know what sort of approach to take, but I think it's like a charity event. I think it's going to be one of those things that happens and it's forgotten very quickly. But yeah, so that being said, when do I think it's going to end? Whenever that Jake KSI fight happens. So I would say if it does happen, 2 years, I think it's got 2 years left in it max. And then naturally YouTube will find different things and there'll be something else. Maybe, I'd love MMA. I know they've done it before, but it wasn't properly run, the Fame MMA thing.
Yeah,
I would
JMX,
love a YouTube
he was in that, wasn't he? JMX. Yeah.
JMX, there's a few other people. Yeah, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see a YouTube MMA night. I think that would be really interesting. And get some of the girls in there as well. There were some girls that were fighting on the MMA card that were really good. It wasn't a YouTuber. It was a girl from Love Island or something like that, George or something. She battered her opponent. It was a really good fight. It was a really good fight. And I think there's potential in that as well. So maybe that's the thing they move on to. Or Logan fights in the UFC. That could be interesting.
As long as something continues as a YouTuber is a combat sport, and that's all that's all good. I hope there's a bit of longevity in it. But Gio, I'm sure we'll catch up soon, mate. Thanks for the time. I'll put all your socials in the description, but we'll catch you later, mate. Thank you.
Legend, bro. Thank you very much for the interview.